All right, so now it's time to talk about, is the XC better than the Ripley? Is it a Ripley replacement? Will Ibis be replacing the Ripley with the XC? Is it a good two-bike quiver with the Ritmo? And where do I think this bike sits in Ibis's lineup? Haha, woo! Oh man, I just want to go freaking faster. It's crazy. This thing is so capable. It really goes to show how far Geo is coming along, guys. What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our second review video. So if you guys watched our first review, you'll know we did start a second channel just for bike reviews, and we're really excited for this channel. We have a lot of awesome projects planned for it, and we'd appreciate any support we can get for it. So if you guys would consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button, it really does help out the channel a ton. And like I said, we have a ton of videos coming for you guys soon, but this video is one that's very special. I actually reviewed a new to me bike, new to the market actually. It's the Ibis XC, and on the last video in the comment section, as well as on my Instagram messages, got a lot of people asking, can you review the XC? So we made it work. We finally made it happen, and yeah, that's where this video is going to come in. So I took this bike out for a ride here in Louisville, Kentucky, really put it through its paces, and I'm ready to give my initial impressions on this bike. I will try to acquire a long-term test bike, but this bike, as you guys know, is, man, really tough to get right now, just because this is Ibis's first take at carbon in-house. And as you guys know, they had a really awesome launch of this thing. They actually came out with a limited edition version of the bike. That's actually this one right here. I know it's crazy, but I believe this is, I can see the number, 16 of 40 in terms of the builds. And it actually belongs to our buddy Sean at N+1 Bikes. And you guys, I do have to say, if you guys are ever in the market for a bike, whether it's an Ibis or he does carry a few other brands, here is his phone number right here. He's Sean from N+1 Bikes, and he really goes above and beyond customer service, and he also takes care of friends of Awesome MTB. So let him know that we sent you, and he will take care of you guys. And for anything I talk about today, or if you guys are just looking for discounts or coupons, in the description of this video, I'll link everything I talk to, as well as some coupon codes as well. And purchases made through any of those links also directly help support the channel. So like I said, we have a ton of projects coming at you guys soon. But for now, let's give you guys my initial impressions on the Ibis XC. Now, before I talk too much about this bike, because I actually already did go for a ride, how about we share that ride with you guys? So this is gonna be a ride here in Louisville, Kentucky. I tried to put it through its paces, and you know what? I'm not gonna kind of spoil it. Here's the footage from that ride right here. All right, so excited to be on the XC for this little test lap. And we are actually in Kentucky. And I don't think I could ask for a better place to test out the XC, because Louisville, I love you, I love your people, but the trails aren't exactly the craziest, and I feel like the XC is gonna excel out here. Should be a really fun time. Let's see how it does on the pump track to warm up. Hopefully everything's tight. Nice. Oh, I'm loving the responsiveness. Oh, this is gonna be the perfect freaking bike for out here. Our first trail is going to be the Trough. This is a fun little mini jump line out here in the parklands. Oh my god, keep in mind this is my first time riding this bike ever. And if I crash, the owner is going to be pretty upset. Sorry, Sean. Oh my god. I'm feeling very natural in this thing right off the get-go though. Whew. You can totally feel how stiff this frame is. That's the one very noticeable thing right off the kind of cuff. Nice. It's also very light. We can talk more about this later, but I want to say sub 4 pound frame. I'll put the exact weight right here, but I'm digging this thing so far. Can I make it? Yes. Oh my god. I didn't even do an all bolts check, you guys. I was really excited to ride this bike. So far, I'm impressed. It feels good to be back on a shorter travel rig than the Ritmo. You guys know the Ripley was probably one of my favorite bikes ever. And I have been freaking frothing to build one up again. God, this is like the Ripley on steroids. Impressed so far. There's a really fun trail over there with a wall ride. I figure let's take it on the cross-country loop over here real quick, and then let's head over to that wall ride. I should probably get adjusted to the bike kind of see what we're working with. But so far the bike, man, I fit really well on this large. And that's another interesting thing that we could talk about later. Normally I'm an XL, but I was looking at the geo chart and the reach on the XL for this is about 20 mils longer than the XL Ritmo. So I ended up opting for the large test bike. The reason I like this loop so much is because there are a good amount of routes out here. And I feel like even on shorter travel rigs, actually more so on them, traction while pedaling is pretty important. If the bike's not hooking up well, especially on those shorter travel rigs, it's just an overall very uncomfortable ride. And all as well slower too. You don't want to be bouncing up and down on the routes. You want the bike to kind of absorb it and just kind of keep going. And that's what this thing is doing. Oh my God, so good. I don't look at the number wheelbase wise, but even on the size large, this thing feels very stable. In and out of corners and down the chunkier bits. And in the corners, I feel like that rear end is as responsive as my other bikes, that being the Ritmo and the Ripley as well. It's weird, it almost feels like I'm riding a really fast Ripley that's stiffer. I don't know if that's gonna make any sense, but that's what I'm feeling right now. And obviously we'll go more in depth as we get to the end of this trail. Oh. No problem. This XTR under load. Wow. I'm actually fairly impressed. Feels like under load, it's able to kind of shift through the gears a little bit smoother. And I definitely miss, can't believe I'm saying this, the mechanical shifting. I didn't realize that little extra half second response time over the electronic that I've been running, the SRAM Axis, definitely missed. But man, it's gonna be a tough one to kind of figure out which one I like more. A couple of good rocky sections. What I really do enjoy right now is no matter if I'm seated pedaling, which I am right now, or I'm out of the saddle right now, it almost feels like the bike gets even more efficient out of the saddle, which is crazy. This thing is on steroids. And man, I am fairly impressed. Whew. So fun. There's probably a lot of people watching this that are probably going to be in between Ripley and XC. I have my thoughts. I'm going to kind of try to focus on the trail a bit. We'll talk later. But things are interesting, guys. So far, man, very impressed with this thing. Whew. Woo. Oh man, I just want to go freaking faster. It's crazy. This thing is so capable. It really goes to show how far Geo is coming along, guys. Looks like the trail's opening up just a tad. I'm finding myself out of the saddle so often on this, and it's crazy how much efficiency I feel like there is on that. Plus the bike, my God, just wants to jib off at everything. Woo! Race mode activated. Oh, Mo's lungs deactivated. All right, so I promised you guys a wall ride, so I'm gonna attempt the wall ride. Oh man, sorry Sean if this doesn't work out. Okay, nice. Oh wow, very composed. Oh my God, this thing is freaking sweet. Bike park, anyone? Okay, maybe I won't take the bike park, but actually very impressed with how composed it handled that section. Oh, I almost ripped the tire off the bead. I think I'm gonna need to put a little bit more air in that rear. That would have been interesting. Whew. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that ride. As you guys can probably tell, I am very impressed with the Ibis XC. So a little bit about me. I actually had the Ripley all of last year, and I really put that bike through the paces. I took it on some big mountain descents, and I also took it on some cross-country rides. That bike actually ended up being my favorite bike I've ever owned. Currently, I'm riding a Ritmo, and I would actually say that I prefer the Ripley over the Ritmo. We do ride for Ibis Cycles, and I have had time on pretty much the entire lineup. And that's why I was really interested in the XC. Was it gonna be a little bit too on the cross-country side? Was I not gonna have enough fun on the downhills? And yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit, but let's talk about the overall build. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the XC, it is actually a 100mm travel 29er. It's set up with a 120mm fork in the front, but in the rear you do have 100mm of travel. And they did design this thing a little bit more on the aggressive cross-country spectrum. So the frame is actually coming in right under 2,000 grams, or about 4 pounds, and that's pretty insane for a carbon frame, and it's also made in the USA, which is a huge plus. But yeah, like I mentioned, 100 mils of travel in the rear, about a 67.2 degree head angle, so fairly slack on the head angle side. And yeah, overall, I feel like Ibis was trying to make a very competitive cross-country race machine, but at the same time, a bike that would handle descents with ease. Now for the frame, now the reason this test actually worked out is because Sean was riding a size large frame. At first, I thought the bike would be too small when he told me about it, and that's when I looked at the geo of this bike on paper. So I was looking at the geo chart on Ibis's website, and I saw that the reach on an XL XC was actually 520, and that's about 20mm or almost an inch longer than my XL Ritmo. And so I started doing the numbers, and I was like, wait, I actually think I would fit on a large, especially if I go up in the stem length just a tad, and that's what I ended up doing. For me personally, I'm 6'2". Riding this thing on the trails, I actually felt like the large fit me really well. It's gonna be interesting for me to decide whether I go with a large or an XL down the line, just because I did actually really enjoy having a little bit of a longer stem on this cross-country setup. Like I said, 6'2", and I felt like the large felt good, but I do feel like I could go either large or XL there. Now let's get into my review of the bike. So first, let's talk about climbing. Climbing and pedaling efficiency was pretty insane on this bike. Like you guys probably saw in that footage, whether I was seated or I was out of the saddle, if anything, I felt like out of the saddle, the bike only got more efficient, which is pretty nuts. A lot of that I think has to be attributed to that DW Link suspension design, and Ibis bikes in general do tend to be a little bit better in the pedaling department, and this thing, combine it with that 100 mils of travel, and you're just gonna have a bike that's gonna pedal really well. And like I said, in and out of corners, I just felt like I constantly found myself pedaling as much as I can out of the corners. And yeah, anytime I went to stand up and really put that power down, it just felt like all of it was translating into forward momentum. And the efficiency of this bike was pretty mind-blowing. When it came time for technical pedaling sections, like over those routes, I also felt like the bike did a very good job of tracking to the trail. And it's starting to get to that point where I think bikes are becoming such good pedalers that it's gonna be tough to start justifying those lockouts. Now, when it comes to the downhill section of this review, once again, my mind definitely was blown on the trails and what this bike could do. I felt like the stability was there from the head angle, and I felt like the bike did track really well to the trail. I also felt like the nimbleness was there from that rear end. I really could kind of whip the bike around in and out of corners. And overall, I just constantly found myself jibbing on the trail and just kind of popping off of roots and popping out of corners. And even when it came time to hit the jump trails, I also was surprised at how stable this bike performed. And like I said, it's my first ride on it, but I never really felt like I needed to hold back. If anything, the only thing that was a little bit limiting was that rear tire. I definitely felt like I could find its limits pretty fast, but overall, very impressed with the Geo and how this thing performed on the trail. And the other thing I was very impressed with on the descents was the stiffness of the frame. This was probably one of the stiffest frames I have ridden, and even comparing it directly to the Ripley. The Ripley I don't feel like is the stiffest frame on the market. If anything, I feel like it does have a little bit of flex built into the rear half of the frame, and you do notice it on the trails. Actually, it's kind of nice because it feels like it almost adds to the traction, especially on those rockier, tighter trails. I just felt like that bike, man, it just tracks so well. On this bike, that stiffness is fairly apparent, and more so than the Ripley. So overall, very stiff frame, which is pretty mind-blowing considering its frame weight, and also very stable frame. All right, so now it's time to talk about, is the XC better than the Ripley? Is it a Ripley replacement? Will Ibis be replacing the Ripley with the XC? Is it a good 2-bike quiver with the Ripmo? And where do I think this bike sits in Ibis's lineup? So right off the back, when I'm comparing this to the Ripley, some things stand out. So like I said, the number one thing is gonna be stiffness. I did feel like even though this was a lighter frame, the stiffness was there. And that's not necessarily only a pro. It can also be a con as well. I did feel with the added stiffness of this bike, that can definitely be very beneficial to a race setting. Obviously, you don't want too much flex in race settings. You want to make sure that all of that efficiency is being translated into forward momentum. And anytime you can make a bike stiffer and lighter, that is a really good trade-off there. But when it comes time to pushing the limits and seeing how far you can get away on a 1-bike quiver, this is definitely not going to be it when comparing it to the Ripley. I feel like if you're going to have that 1-bike quiver where you're going to want to take that bike to Downeyville, and then at the same time you're going to want to race it in your local race, you're not trying to be the most competitive, so you're not trying to get on that podium in Cat 1, but you're just trying to have a good time at the race settings but also take your bike to Downeyville, I feel like the Ripley still is going to hold the edge there. But if you're trying to think of it from a terms of a 2-bike quiver, so say you have the Ripmo or some type of enduro bike, and you're thinking about adding the Ripley to your quiver, that was the one thing for me that was interesting. Whenever I had the Ripley and an enduro bike, I always found myself reaching for the Ripley just because I felt like it was such a good do-everything bike and also climbed really well. It was always a tough thing, and I didn't feel myself riding my enduro bike at the time as much. With this thing, that's where I feel like the sweet spot is, where if I have the Ripmo and I have the XC, and this thing is built for cross-country shredding, I could still push the limits of this thing, but it's not going to be to the point where when I'm pushing the limits of this thing, I'm like, oh man, I'm really still happy I'm on this and on my enduro bike. I'm going to want my enduro bike, and I feel like that ultimate 2-bike quiver is going to be the XC and some form of enduro bike. And the other thing too is, say you don't want that 2-bike quiver, say you just don't like enduro and you do want a bike that's going to tackle trails like I feel like the Tahoe Rim Trail, that's where this thing's going to excel. Sedona, I feel like the XC in Sedona would be an amazing bike. I still feel like that's the proper cross-country trail spectrum in terms of bikes. And I feel like that's where the XC really is going to shine. And you can also beef this thing up because, like I said, you have a stiff platform and you have a fairly slack geo, especially for this category, especially if you're thinking, man, think 2015. If someone showed you this bike in 2015, you'd be like, no, that's not going to happen. But yeah, overall, very impressed with how stable this thing performed on the downhill and how rocket ship like this feels on the climb. So hopefully you guys found this initial impression review of the XC informative. If you guys did, please hit that like button. It does help out the channel a ton, and consider subscribing to the channel because, like I said, we have a ton of projects coming at you guys soon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, you guys, ride awesome. Whew.